Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Dorna Moini, founder and CEO of Gavel, whose journey from big law to building the backbone of legal automation has empowered lawyers, legal aid organizations, and legal tech startups to scale justice and transform legal services for good. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host, and I'm really delighted today to have on Dorna Moini. She is the founder of Gavel, and she has made a name for herself in that regard because it's really made lawyers' work in putting together documents and automating them as easy as possible. I've really been impressed by all of the work that she's done and getting helpful information out into the world. She actually does these little short videos that are really great thumbnail sketches for people to learn more about AI and everything that it does, and also how to automate documents. And I'm just so happy to have her on and to learn more about her life. Dorna, it's a pleasure to have you on. What are you up to now?
Wonderful to be on, Tom. I think I told you I am a huge follower of your podcast, your newsletters. And so when you reached out, I was like, well, Tom, I was going to reach out to you and ask you when you were going to ask me to be on. What am I up to now? I am building Gavel. That is the biggest part of my day-to-day. And we work with lawyers to sell them end-to-end automation software. And can go a little bit more in detail on that. But really our goal is to help you get everything from the inputting of the data to the generation of the documents to potentially billing if you're billing through an online portal, all the way through some of the things that happen after the generation of that first draft. We also have some AI features that help with that piece. So that's why we call ourselves the end-to-end automation suite for lawyers.
And it truly is. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but your system, Gavel, is the back end for some really wonderful startup companies that are using it to provide legal services.
Yes, definitely. So both larger companies that have made a name for themselves in the DIY legal space, hybrid tools, lots of legal aid organizations are using us for client-facing products. Names that you've probably heard of, like Just Tech and Hello Divorce and Landlord Legal, are some of the ones that are built on top of Arkansas Legal Now, which is a new one that I'm a huge fan of. A lot of the names that you've heard of have Gavel as the backbone, but are completely white labeled so that they can build those services without having to hire an engineering team.
And also a great story I remember hearing last year. There was a lawyer who I think he does estate planning and is using Gavel to basically work from wherever he wants. He's like on the beach and he's like, constructing estate plans virtually using Gavel, right?
Yes, we have quite a few of those. They put them in a lot of work into building these amazing systems. And then they're able to work from anywhere they want because they basically become software founders of their own right. They've turned what is a legal service into a legal product. Another one that maybe you saw is that I love giving as an example is this lawyer, Dennis Doss, who started a law firm called Doss Law and now has a platform called Doss Docs. And he does mortgage documents and sells it to a variety of different types of clients, but has really built sort of an empire that has its own brand and name and is growing very, very rapidly. So that's another fun one. But he's in Cabo half the year and the other half the year he's like in Orange County or skiing somewhere.
Wow. By the way, speaking of Orange County, you're based in California, Southern California, right?
I am. I'm in LA. Yes. From Orange County, but in LA now.
I wouldn't say former Angelina because I grew up in LA, but it's nice to talk to someone else who's from LA and creating legal tech.
Yeah, it's a great space. I mean, I feel like we're seeing more founders, both generally and also in legal tech, coming out in LA. So it's a nice place to be. Nice weather, good environment. Now you can work from anywhere.
And so I definitely want to get into later in our talk more of the topics of the day. AI is going to put us out of work and all those kinds of things. But first, as my audience probably knows, I want to get into your origin story. Right now you're in LA. Did you grow up in LA?
So I grew up in Orange County in Newport Beach and went to high school there. My parents are from Iran, but I was born in California. Then went to New York for school. I went to NYU, came back to LA, so back to Southern California for law school. Then was in San Francisco for several years working. And then finally, when I decided I was going to start Gavel, figured I could be anywhere I wanted to. And so decided to move back to LA. And I was actually right before COVID started. We thought we were going to build our whole company around LA, and then everything went remote. So now we have sort of people all over, but mostly we have hubs in LA and Seattle.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing growth with your company, and I'm just so happy for you for that. I do want to drill down a little bit into kind of the step-by-step. Where in Orange County did you grow up?
In Newport Beach,
Oh, right. Sorry.
specifically for those who know it well. I sort of grew up there in the days right before the OC, the TV show, came out. And so I think Orange County changed a lot when the OC came out, because it became more on the map. Like when I went to college, I was finally able to, like, people knew where I was from. But before then, I think people just thought Orange County. I would just say I live somewhere south of LA.
So for people that might not be as familiar with Orange County, like if you could just give a high level image of what it is.
Yeah, so it's about an hour south of LA. It's a suburb of LA, but it's becoming very much, I feel like it's almost just an extension of LA. There's a lot of beach cities. Not all of Orange County is by the beach, but there are a lot of beach cities. So it's got that sort of casual West Coast California vibe. Most of our high school was wearing Uggs with short skirts and scarves and tank tops all at the same time. That alone probably gives you a good impression of what Orange County is.
Do you come from a big family? Do you have a lot of brothers and sisters?
I have just one sister, actually. Yeah.
Is she older or younger?
She's younger. She's 3 years younger. She lives in LA, so it's nice to have her close by. And then I have cousins, but they're all over the place, not even all in the US.
So your mom and dad immigrated from Iran, right?
They did. Yes.
What kind of work did each of them do?
Yeah. So both of my parents were business owners, which I think actually was very formative for me. And interestingly, it was almost the opposite of what you would think. I think a lot of people think, oh, your parents are business owners, so then you want to become a business owner. But the grass is always greener. And they always said, oh, in my early days, they were like, oh, just go get a regular job, like a stable job, where you don't have to worry about the ups and the downs. So that sort of was part of what led me to go work at a law firm for some time. But I do now, thinking back, realize how much flexibility they had, even though they ran their own businesses, because they were able to drop us off at school and pick us up from school. And you just sort of really melds into my life now. You sort of just work your schedule around. You may be working just as much or much more, but you're able to have that flexibility. And I think that was really attractive, seeing that in my parents.
Yeah, what they do definitely opens the doors, opens our minds to what's possible, kind of provides a template for what you can do. And I think if, for example, they hadn't had their own businesses or done that, then sometimes we might think, well, that's not really something I feel comfortable doing, even though it probably is well within our skill set to do it.
Definitely. Yeah.
So some great examples there. I was wondering, did you have any early influences or a mentor of some kind that kind of push you in the direction of law? Or
so my parents were from Iran and they came here. I'm actually a dual citizen of Iran and the US. I haven't been back for a little bit, but we go back and forth. My dad's actually there right now. But they grew up in Iran. They came to the US to study. And then the revolution happened. My parents met, they got married, they had us. And so they decided that they wanted to raise their kids here. But we still had really close ties to Iran. Like we would go back, my grandparents lived there. We would go back every summer. And one of the things that I constantly saw was just the disparity between different justice systems around the world. And there are so many things that we can and do complain about the US justice system. And I actually think that's one of the wonderful things about the US justice system is you can sit here and complain about it and you can hopefully propose solutions to what's going to make it better. But across the world, there are many jurisdictions where you don't even have that freedom to be able to speak openly about what's wrong with the system and try to make it better. And so I from an early age wanted to go into international human rights law. And that is what I went to law school for. Like, I think a lot of people write on their law school application essays, like, I'm going to do human rights law or I want to go into civil rights. But, and I don't know, maybe everyone really means it, but I really, really meant it. I really wanted to go work in international human rights law. And so that was really the propelling force for me. Thinking back, I didn't really have many lawyers. I didn't have any lawyers that I can actually think of in my family. And I definitely didn't have any like close lawyers who were role models for me. But of course, I was lucky to have friends who had parents who were lawyers and have those examples. And I think that's also really important, is to even just see that it's a possible profession for you.
And in, researching you to be prepared for this interview, you really excelled at NYU, like magna cum laude, summa in your major, which was economics. I would imagine that majoring in economics, like that bundled together with your influence from your parents, probably was a great unlock.
Definitely. Yeah. Lots of really practical skills came out of that. I went into college wanting to be an English major, and that was my declared major going in, and loved my freshman year English courses, but then realized that I should probably pick something where I had a little bit more of a direct connection to what I would go into. And I think economics was really a really good foundation for me, and just teaching me about the world and opening up my eyes.
My journey was kind of similar in that growing up in LA, I went back east and then I came back for law school like you did. But you went to the other one. I went to UCLA law. You went to USC, right?
I would say we're rivals, but at the same time, I feel like the law school students they don't really care about the rivalry. I have actually never been to a single USC football game. I've never done a tailgate. Also, I went to NYU, which is sort of the antithesis of the typical college experience. So we had shirts at NYU that said NYU football undefeated since, now I forget the year, I think it's like 1836, because there was like, I think there was a football team at the very, very beginning, but then there was no football team at NYU. NYU was we didn't have fraternities, we didn't have sororities, we didn't have football games. So I love UCLA still. We can still be friends.
Well, that's good to hear. And at USC Law School, you were really deeply involved in human rights. Like you were on a journal where you were an editor, right?
So I was on a journal, and I also did a few of the human rights clinics. And actually that was a pretty formative experience for me too. I was in the International Human Rights Clinic, and the professor there, Professor Hannah Gary, was an incredible role model to me, and actually sort of was helpful in helping me decide what to do next with my career. She had an illustrious career in human rights, but she had also gone and clerked and worked at a firm for some time. And one of the things she told me was that even if you want to go do human rights law, having that foundation of working in a high stress, that type of environment that you have at a law firm is a really great background. And then you'll be able to dive into anything you want. And so I did work with the International Human Rights Clinic at a few of the tribunals, both remotely. And then I also went on site in The Hague to work for several months at the ICTY. But she also sort of led me down the direction of, I can go work at a firm for a few years, and then that'll be a really good launching pad for the rest of my career.
Wow. So it sounds like she was a pretty influential person during your law school career.
Definitely. Yes, definitely.
Was there anyone else like that, somebody who maybe influenced you with regard to technology?
So with technology, not really until I moved to San Francisco for my first job as a first year associate. I feel like when I was going to law school, technology wasn't as much, definitely wasn't as much of a thing as it is now. And I might be mistaken, but I don't remember there being a course that was more about legal technology, as opposed to, like, obviously there's like technology and the law where you're reading about cases that involve technology, but there wasn't, as far as I remember, any course or sort of indoctrination around using technology other than the Lexis and Westlaw legal research pizza parties that they threw. I went for the free pizza.
Yeah, for sure. They know the tricks to get us early.
Exactly.
So one thing I saw was the Open Society Institute. And were you actually on location in Mauritania?
I was, yeah. So that was actually before law school, and that sort of was part of this whole goal that I had to go into human rights law. When I was at NYU, I worked with the Open Society Institute. First in New York, I actually speak three languages. So I speak Farsi. I went to a French elementary school, so I speak French, and then obviously I speak English. And so they were working with people in Mauritania, and they needed someone who spoke French. So I worked a little bit doing some translation work with them. I was in college, so I didn't have a ton of real skills to provide, but I did know how to speak the two languages. So I was providing some translation. And then they needed someone to go on site in Mauritania to work in conjunction with the Open Society Institute and a local NGO called SOS Esclave, which is like SOS Esclave means slaves. And that was actually started by someone who was a former slave in Mauritania. Background on this: Mauritania was the last country with institutionalized and legalized traditional forms of slavery. So what I mean by that is now we have lots of modern forms of slavery, like human trafficking. But Mauritania, until we went with the Society Institute, we worked with this organization. Obviously, the National Assembly was working on this. We were drafting legislation to make slavery illegal, and then also to pass a few anti-discrimination measures, although we had sort of like a light hand on those because obviously we're starting from a really low baseline. And that was really what my work was to work in conjunction with those organizations, be sort of a liaison, represent some of the interests and policy viewpoints of the Open Society Institute and get that passed. And actually, by the end of my time in Mauritania, we were able to get that passed. Although that is the easiest part, the hardest part is actually what all the work they did afterwards to get it implemented in the country.
That's amazing. And I mean, besides Iran, like, had you ever been anywhere else?
Now I'm getting my own timelines mixed up. I mean, I've traveled a lot, including for work, honestly. But the one other place that I've been that is sort of unique is Tajikistan. I went to Tajikistan actually after Mauritania. I went to Tajikistan through it's a Fulbright program that's focused on teaching Americans critical languages, and Persian is one of them. Farsi is one of them. And I speak Farsi and spoke Farsi in the house, but it took my Farsi to sort of like another level. It's really interesting because obviously the US government doesn't have any relationship with Iran, but Tajikistan and also Afghanistan speak languages that are almost Farsi. So they speak Tajik and then they speak Dari in Afghanistan, which are slightly different dialects of Farsi. But for that reason, we were able to go there and get a little bit more immersed. It's a really interesting country because they speak Farsi or a dialect of Farsi, but then they actually write it in Cyrillic because they were a former Soviet Union country. So it's just really fascinating to see the microcosm of languages coming together.
I'm also curious whether that experience, like in different countries with different languages and obviously like different legal assumptions about things that you worked on to change, having an early experiences like that, do you feel that changed your point of view about things? Like, did it make you think differently about the world when you came back to the States?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there is one of the things that I learned most, especially about working in countries like that, is just the different styles of communication, working styles. Like I would show up to a meeting in Mauritania and people wouldn't show up for like 2 hours and then they'd be drinking tea for like another hour. And that is very different. Like right now, if I'm late 1 minute to a Zoom call, I'm like apologizing profusely. So very different working styles, but I think it helped me adapt to those different working styles. And by doing that, it helps you bridge two sides of dialogue, whether that's, I think, it's kind of a farther stretch, but it really does. It is something that helps me even in my current role at Gavel, because I'm managing a lot of people now. And so understanding how to get two different viewpoints and two very different styles to work together is something that I experienced in the extreme and now can apply in the more immediate.
One thing I don't want to forget to mention is that you also went to Sciences Po. And I think I might be wrong, but I know that Dr. Megan Ma went there as well. And it seems like the time frame might have even been overlapping, but that's pretty cool.
I did not overlap with her, but I have to talk to her about this because I think I've probably seen this somewhere on her LinkedIn or somewhere, but I haven't chatted with her. So I'll have to bring that up.
Yeah. And you were studying French literature there?
I have a double major. One of my majors is French, and I got that just because I took so many French classes alongside the other classes. And interestingly, I was able to fulfill some classes that satisfied both the French and the econ requirement because I took some French econ classes at Sciences Po.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, jumping forward a little bit, tell me more about your work at The Hague with the UN. What was that about, and what was that like?
Yes. So when I was at the International Human Rights Clinic at USC in LA, we were working with both ICTY and then also the ICTR, which is for Rwanda. And we were helping the judges do legal research, do fact gathering, just like look through the evidence and write portions of everything that a law clerk does. And there was an opportunity to go work in The Hague. And so I actually did this instead of a bar trip. So a lot of times people, they will take the bar in the summer and then they'll start working like later that year. But you have several months off and people go backpack through Europe. But I decided to go work at the ICTY. So I spent about 4 months there working on a case. The case was Haradi Nye, who was the former prime minister of Kosovo. And it was actually a really interesting political environment because I was working on his retrial. So he'd already been tried for war crimes during the conflict. And actually, it was a crazy situation. There was a mistrial because 2 of the witnesses went missing and they wouldn't respond to anyone, I think because they had gotten death threats. And so there was a retrial now, and we were really just assessing evidence, doing research, putting together portions of what ended up being a very, very long draft of the opinion because there were so many charges inside of that opinion. And we ended up acquitting him. And it was a really interesting political environment because there was just a ton more evidence on the Serbian side. And so a lot of Serbian officers and officials were being convicted of a variety of different war crimes. And this was sort of like the one person from Kosovo. And so there was a lot of fear actually within the court as to whether you obviously have to be completely neutral, but there was a lot of fear as to what's going to happen if he's not charged, because it's going to give the court a tinge of, is the court biased? And I can tell you from the inside, there was no bias there. There just was not the evidence that we needed to convict him of a variety of these different crimes when you look at these very complicated war crime statutes. But it was a very interesting time to be at the court. And it was towards the end. I think after I left, there were only a few more cases that were left over the course of the next few years that were going on.
Wow, what a compelling experience to go through. And a thread that runs through everything, right, is that especially now to leave political considerations out of judicial decisions and deliberations.
It's so tough, especially with such a high conflict situation that led to so many deaths and such a terrible situation. But at the end of the day, I think that's where the judicial mind comes into play. I actually was friends with a lot of people who worked on both sides, like on the prosecutor side, on the defense side. And so it was interesting to be in that neutral ground where you heard all of the opinions on both sides, but you have to stay in the center, and you actually see that there is a really good balance being made by most judges who are really just trying to do the right thing. Most justices.
Yeah. So sprouting out of all of this amazing worldwide experience in these, really deep and meaningful issues, you then take the next step into big law, right? And you work as a law firm associate. And what was that change like? And what did you learn?
So big change in the topic, and I actually think about this when I'm interviewing people all the time. I think that if you can have passion and love for work that you do in any area, you can sort of channel that in any other area of work and become really passionate and good at what you do in another area that maybe is not as like traditionally hot or interesting like international human rights is. So I started working at a law firm. I think that was one of the best experiences that I could have had as a foundation for launching the rest of my career. It was a very different environment. I mean, I had never worked like 15, 16 hours a day often. I was a litigator. I worked mostly in employment law. The cases that I worked on ranged from, did a lot of class actions, mostly defense side employment class actions, did a lot of trade secret cases, also employment law, and then did some really interesting, like high profile executive employment discrimination cases as well. And one of the great things about employment law, which I didn't really realize going in, is that there are so many witnesses to take that there are some low stakes depositions and low stakes arguments to be made that juniors can get a lot of experience on. So as a first year, I was able to take depositions of like class members in a class action. I was able to go argue like more minor motions in court. And I sort of was able to compare that to some of my peers who were working in some of the other practice areas where the cases are just too, like they're only a handful of witnesses. The cases are just too important. You can't put a junior associate on them. And I think I got really, really lucky to get that type of experience early on. And then I was able to both first chair and second chair a few trials and arbitrations, and really just learned, I mean, one of the best skills that I learned is just work really hard, be incredibly detail oriented. And especially when you are at that level where you just don't know a lot. Like I think every new job you take, you realize you don't know anything.
Mhm.
And it gave me sort of like a sense of humility. But I loved everything that I did. Like you could give me discovery that really should be automated nowadays, but you could tell me to like answer discovery requests, and I would sit there with like passion and respond to those discovery requests.
I definitely see that. That, working in a law firm, it instills that sense of discipline, instills that sense of work ethic. And I could see that that was a wonderful basis too for the next step, which is definitely want to talk to you with the time we have left about Gavel, which started off initially help self legal, right? And then became document.
Yes, exactly. Lots
Yeah.
of names. So it was a very different product at the very beginning. So I was at Sidley. I was a litigator, but I also did a lot of pro bono work on the side. And you have about, usually at most law firms, you have like 100 or to 200 hours of pro bono to do. And I always like maxed that out or sometimes did more. And one of the areas that I did a lot of pro bono work in was domestic violence law.
Mm.
And I was finding that a lot of the cases that they wanted help on were these restraining order cases where it was typically a set of documents that you needed to file along with a declaration that would get a restraining order, gun restriction order, maybe child support, maybe spousal support, depending on what exactly the facts of the case were. And we would do that phase of the work. And there was some complexity to it, obviously. Like there's a lot of detailed facts that you need to know about the client, especially to put the declaration together. But it was also pretty rules based. I felt like if I knew the set of scenarios, I could tell you exactly what documents you needed to build, and I could express that to you in a set of rules. So alongside this, we oftentimes had some of these clients coming to us and saying, will you help me with this other aspect of my case, like representing me in court or taking on an appeal of a novel issue that came up in one of these domestic violence cases? And I felt like my time was capped. And if only I could make those other pieces of the process a little bit more efficient, I would be able to spend more of my time on the stuff that I actually went to law school for and the pieces that I had gained so much skill on. So going back to sort of your question on what got you exposed to technology, I lived in San Francisco. That's where I started as an associate. At the time, I feel like every engineer was in San Francisco. Now you have engineers everywhere, but a lot of my friends were engineers. A lot of people worked at tech companies. And I got together with a friend of mine and I said, will you help me build something like TurboTax, but not for tax, for domestic violence law? And so that was the very first thing we wanted to build. And we called it Help Self Legal. The idea is it's like self-help, but words reversed, which a lot of people got confused. It's a terrible name. But we built exactly that. So we built a platform for domestic violence survivors. It hit about half of the counties because the law is so fragmented. It hit about half of the counties in California where you could get on the platform, answer questions. It would take you down different paths, and then it would help you generate all the documents you needed for that case. I knew nothing about business, so this will reflect that we were selling to everyone. We were like, we'll sell it to the legal aid organizations, we'll sell it to the consumers, we'll sell it to the law firms who want to use it with their pro bono team. So we were not focused at all, but we were seeing that all these different types of users needed it. And then what sort of led to the next phase was Bob Ambrogi somehow found out about us. And I had no idea who Bob Ambrogi was. I was like, oh, this random blogger is reaching out. He wants to write an article. And I was like, sure, I'll talk to you about it. And he wrote about Help Self Legal and how we were trying to solve domestic violence through technology. I didn't realize how big of an audience he had, but the day of the article came out, tons of people started reaching out to me and saying, not just consumers, but people who were lawyers in a variety of different areas of law. And they were asking me if I could help them build TurboTax for expungements, TurboTax for child support, spousal support, one for evictions. There were a few that were coming out of this on that day. And that was sort of the light bulb moment for us of there are so many different types of lawyers who want to build these types of tools. So why don't we just go build a software platform? Instead of becoming like a dev shop, why don't we go build a software platform on which they can build whatever they want? That was sort of the next phase in which we first called it Documate, but then rebranded as Gavel.
And it's such a great success story, Dorna. Like have really like landed and expanded and touched a lot of people and empowered them to do exactly that, like promoting their own rights and taking charge of their lives. Is there any story about that like stands out to you as one that you're really proud of?
So many. In our early days, we worked mostly like our core customer was legal aid organizations, and we still work a lot with legal aid organizations. But we also now work with a lot of small firms, mid-sized firms, large firms. Most of our customers are small and mid-sized, but we have some larger firms as well. I think the types of stories that really touch me are whether they are a law firm or whether they are a legal aid organization, where they can scale up what they're doing exponentially and serve so many more people who never would have been able to afford their services or access their services because they're now able to use technology. And the situations where I see that most saliently, I guess, is in the clinical setting, where we have some of the legal aid organizations who we work with who use Gavel to automate areas of the law and then empower their staff or their pro bono attorneys to use that technology in clinics. And oftentimes they'll come back to me and say, oh, we did like an expungement clinic, and last time we served this number of people, and now this time with technology, we were able to serve 10 or 15 times that number of people because the user has already inputted their data. Now it's more a matter of the lawyer reviewing and finalizing rather than doing everything from scratch that really isn't even a legal skill. So those types of stories I love. I get these all the time, but like one that comes to mind is Bet Zedek in LA uses us for a lot of their clinics. They actually came to us when they had a clinic coming up in a month, and they were like, we need to somehow improve our processes because we got so many more people signed up for this clinic than we thought we were. This one was a name change clinic, and they were able to get everything up and running for the clinic. They like sped like hyper speed, built their automation out. They were able to get it up and running, and we were able to serve 11x what we were serving in the last clinic because we're using technology. And those are people who they would have had to turn away. I've been a legal aid attorney. I volunteered in the courts. I've seen lines wrapped around the courthouse waiting for legal aid. Self-help window is like 10 to 12 on once a month. And if you don't get to the attorneys, you're just not going to be served because there's not enough people to help you.
Absolutely. And there are voices, I'm sure you've heard them, I've heard them too, where some attorneys are critical of it, saying, well, it's not perfect, or, like X, Y, and Z, reasons to critique it. But compared to what, right? So like, you're exactly right that otherwise the doors are closed. Like you don't have any help whatsoever. And having this help, especially when there's legal domain experts that are putting it together, like it's pretty good.
So true. And, on that point, 77% of people with a legal issue don't hire a lawyer. They didn't use a lawyer at all. So many of these people are avoiding the law altogether. And they are sort of like you're saying, they're going down alternate routes. Either they don't get access to services at all, or they're doing a DIY method that is definitely inferior to what you would have with some form of technology helping them. And it is so complicated in some of these areas. Like even as a lawyer, sometimes I'm navigating these forms in an area where you've never been exposed to them is, you've gone to law school. It's still hard to figure out, what does this court want? Is it going to get kicked back? What are the different forms that you need? Like there's just so much complexity that we've introduced into our system. And that's a whole other, a whole other soapbox about that. But regulatory change, I think, is maybe a little bit harder, but at the very least that we can do is introduce technology to assist.
And speaking of that, that's probably a perfect jumping off point to asking you about AI, because that's all we talk about every day, all the time. I understand that you've incorporated in a pretty interesting way to make, again, people able to do like 10x what they would normally do. So if you talk a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. Our core platform at Gavel is rules-based document automation. And it is meaning you are introducing rules that are very predictable. It's deterministic. You say every time that, let's say in a corporate deal, like the deal is over this dollar amount, it's in this state, and there are like 5 shareholders or more, let's say, these exact things are going to happen. And predictably how that document is going to be generated. We also have introduced AI in 2 different ways. One is we sort of have 2 different products, but they sort of tie into each other. One is Gavel Workflows, which is our rules-based automation system. We use AI in Gavel Workflows to help you onboard. So when you're building these automated rules-based systems, you can load all of your perfect documents to our system, and we will suggest, here's how we suggest you automate these documents. So these are the questions that you need to ask your client, or information that you need to gather from the client. This is how it's going to flow into the documents. These are the documents that are going to be generated based on those rules. So that's one way that we've incorporated AI. And that's been really powerful to just help people get off the ground faster, because automation takes time sometimes. The second piece is we also now have an AI assistant directly inside of Microsoft Word. That piece is called Gavel Exec. And we see people use it as a standalone tool sometimes, but we also see people use it as an add-on to our rules-based document automation system. So you may have generated documents through rules, but then you might need to tweak certain sections inside of that document. So you can ask it questions about your document. You can upload, you can connect it to your databases and all of your documents to pull and draw from language that you would typically use. That becomes helpful in the areas where you didn't already have a set of templates to use, but rather you're drawing on some more judgment calls, some more unique thought process, some more unique decision making.
Wow. So it's like an educated co-pilot to help you like draft better contracts and agreements and templates and things like that?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Wow. So with that, Dorna, like amazing stuff that you're working on. And like there's so much that you're working on because you work with customers. You work on the development of all of this wonderful technology and even rolling out exec and these new functionalities within Gavel and, everything else in your life. I really am curious, and I think our audience could really benefit from it in getting any tips or tricks from you about how do you keep it all balanced? How do you juggle all of those things?
Great question. So I would say 2 main things. One is having process. So I will say it's like, I don't have a minute of my day that is not already like allocated to what I'm going to do. And obviously there's always like fires and things that come up that make you have to change. But for the most part, I know like, what are my priorities? What am I going to do next in any particular day? Alongside that, I actually still track my time. I think this is actually one of the most useful things I do. I track my time and I categorize it into different groups. So it's like, is it one-on-one meetings or internal meetings or company strategy or product or sales or marketing? And I keep very close eye on that. And every week at the end of the week, I look at where I've spent my time and I think about where I could have delegated some of that work, where maybe some of the work that I did was not the highest and best use of my time. And that helps me use my time more efficiently. So like I have 2 kids now. There's my life is very different than it was when I first started the company, when I could just get up, sit in front of the computer, and then go to bed right after I get away from the computer. So there's a lot more that I need to balance inside of that schedule. And I think just understanding for myself and continuously reassessing what is the most important thing that I'm doing and am I actually focusing my time on it helps me get to that result.
Well, when you do what you love, you're doing what you're passionate about, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's a great idea. To me, though, like it almost sounds like a little exhausting to keep track of everything.
Maybe it's not for everyone.
The last question I have for you is related to that. And that's that, you've had and are having a great career. And I'm really excited to see everything that you're working on and going to be working on in the future. And I'm just thinking of when you've done all of this and Gavel being the success that it is and it's continuing to grow, what makes all of this worthwhile for you?
For me, it's really the customer stories. We can look at a more statistical level on what's happening with our customers. And that's really powerful. How many more customers are they able to serve? How much of a dent are they making in the work that they want to do, whether that's more mission driven and to low income users or to scaling out their businesses at firms. But the piece that really gets me re-energized is those very specific stories. Like just today, Legal Aid of Chicago just reached out to me telling me they got an LSC grant for their expungement work to do that on Gavel. And right after that, they're going to work on Gavel to automate some of their children and families team work as well. And that's one very specific story, but those are the types of stories that really motivate me, that the very genesis of Gavel is still being continued through all of the amazing work that our customers are doing for their clients and the impact that they're making.
Well, it's an amazing story. Like I said, I'm really excited to see where you go with it. Let me ask you one more question. What's next for Gavel? Like, is there something that hasn't come out yet that you're working on?
Well, we have a lot of new features that are coming out on Gavel. We are really trying to have Gavel, both Gavel Workflows and Gavel Exec, work better on the training side to help law firms get their associates trained up on how their new form of work is going to be. And so we're working on a lot of different partnerships right now. Right now, we work with over 100 different law schools across the world. And they oftentimes are using our software to train up lawyers on how they're going to operate in the real world, in what's probably going to be a very different and new world for lawyers. And so that's one of the things that we're constantly incorporating into our product. And some of the features that you'll continue to see come out in both of our products are around how can law firms be at the forefront of legal technology, but also make sure that their teams are the most well-equipped to be facing that new world.
So you hear that, everyone. Dorna can help you stay at the forefront of this. Gavel can help you automate it. So definitely keep in touch with her and what she's doing. And to do that, how can they follow you?
So as you mentioned, I am on all the socials. My handle is Dorna @Gavel. I also talk a lot about how lawyers use tech on those channels. And then anyone can also reach out to me. I'm Dorna @Gavel.io. And you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Well, thank you so much, Dorna, for being on. It's really been a pleasure.
Wonderful, wonderful to be on. Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
And to all of you for watching, it's been a wonderful experience getting to learn more about Dorna, right? I know myself, I've known her for years, but getting to know more of her origin story has been wonderful. And I thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.